Hello and welcome back to Reading Past Midnight. I'm your host, Ron Rutstein. Today I'm going to be reviewing Today I'm going to be reviewing a new volume of poetry, Uncomfortable Ecologies by Elizabeth Joy Levinson. I got this from Library Thing for a pre-publication review. They very kindly sent it to me, and I quite enjoyed it, actually. This is Elizabeth Levinson's first full-length poetry collection. She has had 2 chapbooks published, and all of these have been or most of these have been in various journals over roughly the last 10 or 12 years. And now she's got a full collection going. So I will put the information down below on the volume. Again, Uncomfortable Ecologies by Elizabeth Joy Levinson. This is by Unsolicited Press in Portland, Oregon. Okay. So this was sent to me as an ebook, and I printed it out so that I could make notes and mark it up for this review. It's 100 pages, consisting of 2 collections, or rather consisting of 2 sections. The first is called By Land, and the second by Sea, I think. Yes, the second by Sea. So as I said, this is a nice collection of poetry. Her style and writing has a lot to do with nature, a lot to do with family history, mostly a rural setting, with one piece that could be urban or suburban, maybe a couple that could be suburban. There are a handful of poems in here that I really like. There are a few that I really don't like, and most in general I like, but a little bit better. It's nothing stupid. Most of the collection I like. There are a few that I really like, and a handful that I don't particularly like. But to give you a flavor, I'm going to read little bits and pieces from a couple of the bits and pieces. I'm going to read you some bits and pieces of some of the poems. This is called A Horse is a Door, and this is after a painting by Magritte. And I kind of broke this up into 2 sections. The first section, which is about 5 lines, the first section, which is about 5 lines, clearly refers to the painting. And the second section, which is 3 stanzas, if I'm reading this right, yes, I have a turn of page, is more reminiscent of Robert Burns' Ode to a Mouse. Right now what I need is a field mouse, a downy gray and small furry thing, a breakable thing, a warm thing to place into your hand. Let it run up your sleeve and over your shoulders and down your spine. Don't move too much. Don't lean against the wall. You could crush it or scare it. And while its nails make you shiver, remember, it only wants for some place safe to curl up and sleep. One more stanza after that, but I felt this was a little more reminiscent of Bobby Burns than Magritte. It is certainly not a surrealistic poem, which one might expect on something after Magritte. It is a lyric poem, and it's quite beautiful, but I would say that it's almost like it's 2 poems. The second section where she's no longer talking about Magritte, but she's talking about the field mouse, I like a lot more. Probably because of my fondness for nature and small critters. Isopod. Lay plate upon plate, sling this dream together with thin connective tissue, pull them tight, round the robin into a ball, let it fall into your hand, and look, in the slow, slow unfurl, uncurl. Can you see through? What tiny heart skips a beat before it opens? Isopod is like those little water bugs that will curl up if you touch them. In the poem Home, I just made a little notation. She's got another reference to a tiny mouse. There's a reference to fur in here, insects, again, some of the naturalistic writing, and it kind of presages some themes that she goes into a little deeper in some of the later poems in this section on land. That's a nice poem. Fur. Now the poem for this one I really liked. This poem is about a scene where they witness a weasel running off with a chipmunk while they're out camping. And it says, "You told me not to look, and I almost listened. I almost missed it. The loneliness of love is that not one of us will ever get it right, no matter how hard we try." Yeah, I like the way that she pulls in, of course, the universal emotion of love after witnessing the scene. I assume it's her husband who told her or not to look because she might be horrified witnessing the cruelty that nature can be sometimes. But again, this is of the natural world, fur. I like this whole poem. I just read you the little bit at the end of it. But she does make a note in the last stanza. There was no brutality, this rarely seen thing. And it really isn't, because when wildlife is hunting, there's no sense of hatred. They are trying to assuage their hunger, and they do that by hunting and by capturing and killing, and they take it back to feed to their families. Part of the natural world, no brutality, like she says. It's a beautiful thing in a different kind. Excuse me. It's a beautiful scene, witnessing something that you wouldn't think is necessarily beautiful. Natural world hunting, feeding itself. Think of all the nature programs you watch that focus on the feeding habits of various animals. Witnessing it like this in one creature that's beautiful feeding on a smaller creature that is also beautiful. I think that's a nice theme, very nice poem. A line in the poem, "We have nearly run out of helium," which we have. I quite like this line. "I wish for a bird in my lungs for the power of song." I love birds. I happen to love the sound of bird song in the morning and in the evening. I like it in those times of year where my window is open and right before the sunrise you hear the wild bird song, which is just beautiful. And then she makes a little reference to helium and flying that I don't quite get, but maybe you as a reader will. I know we are indeed running out of helium in the world. Subnivean. Subnivean is a layer of life that's between the earth and the snow in winter, or in areas where there's permafrost. And this is a beautiful, beautiful poem. Just to give you a hint, beneath feet of snow, where it is less cold, where small plants hold, like studs, like girders, walls built in sublimation, tiny ice castles, crystalline rooms for moles or mice. They shelter in snow. Beautiful poem. And I think that's one you'll enjoy if I do convince you to pick up a copy of this book. I hope so. I hope so. I wish this young lady a long and glorious career of writing beautiful poems. This is a window strike. This is also one that I quite liked. Again, we have a bird image, which I love. Indigo bunting breaks from my fingers, the flight of you, fraught and frightened, frenetic energy on fractured wing. You won't get far, the garden contains you. A firefly, the next poem, which is about collecting fireflies in a jar when young. No, I'm sorry. This is about the uses put to the biological chemical that lights up the firefly. Very, very interesting poem. It's not beautiful because the subject is not beautiful, but it is fitting to what the subject is. In the latter part of the poem, she does mention her father and nephews capturing fireflies in the summer. I think I did that when I was a kid too. And then it dies behind glass on the nightstand as the boys fall to dreaming. Yes, when we're young and doing things like that, we don't really think about the repercussions of what we're doing for the creature that we're capturing. Very nice little poem. The Starlings of Bridgeport. Even though I love birds, I don't like starlings. Starlings were imported by some idiot who felt that we had to have every bird mentioned in Shakespeare in the New World. So they brought starlings over from Europe, and they have taken over the entire country. They nearly wiped out the bluebird population by taking over their habitat. So I'm not a fan of starlings. A lot of people don't know the little history of starlings. It's a nice poem, but my personal animosity here gets in the way. And that happens sometimes. Poetry is personal to the author, but it's also personal to the reader, because we bring our own prejudices to bear when we read things like this, and some things trigger certain thoughts that allow us to go to certain places, and some things like this trigger something distasteful, like it did for me. That is not a fault in the poet or the poem. You can even say that's what the poem is meant to do, even when you go somewhere with it that the poet didn't intend, because the poet doesn't know you personally. So when you don't like something, if you're reading a poem and you don't like it, sometimes it's worthwhile to take a look at why you don't like it, and you'll learn something about yourself, or you might not. Oops, that page went flying. So this is an interesting poem to contrast with the starlings, parakeets in Douglas Park, Chicago. Not exactly a place where you would expect to find parakeets. It is strange, the parrots would say, as the wind stays and the wind picks up strength. It was never a home for them, but where else would they go, removed from their homes and then released? It is no freedom to be so far from home. Um, then she makes in the last two lines a very important point when you're talking about invasive species, even though they can be quite beautiful. Nobody knows for sure what the right thing is. Some of these, and this poem is longer than what I read to you, obviously. She does mention the problems that the parakeets cause, as well as their beauty. And we really don't know what the right thing is. We should not have brought them here, but the way the world is now, it's just not possible to isolate one part of the world from the other. This brings to mind the Asian emerald beetles, which are wiping out the native ash trees here in New England, where I live, and basically across the whole country. It's their larva that digs and feeds under the bark of the tree, and then the bark rots away and falls off, and the tree is dead. If you happen to see one of the emerald beetles, the adult forms of the beetle, it's quite a beautiful insect, very vivid green, and justifying its name, the emerald beetle. These things are happening all around us. They've been happening for quite some time. And yeah, nobody knows for sure what the right thing is. Such an appropriate line. It's one of the beauties that I find in poetry, the ability of one or two lines just to really strike at a truth. And she does that right there. Domicile. I'm feeling how the prairie might have moved beneath me, grasses with roots that grew deep into the earth so they could withstand the often fire and long winter. With this piece, of course, with the mention of grasses and her own feelings about the world under her feet, kind of reminds me of Whitman. Obviously, Leaves of Grasses comes to mind when Leaves of Grass comes to mind when you read that little stanza. At least it did for me. She goes on, what tender blades broke beneath these bricks? Some days a home feels less than that. I'm sorry. What tender blades broke beneath these bricks? Some days a home feels like less than that. And there's more to this poem. Quite nice. Domicile. What you don't know. I quite like this very short poem, so go out and buy it and read it. Don't. I'm not going to read this to you because the few lines it is, I'd have to read the whole thing. Don't want to do that. That was again one of the ones that I quite liked. What Wolves Have You Been is an interesting poem. 3 prose verses, prose poem. What wolf are you? 2 stanzas. What wolves have you been? What wolf are you, and what wolves have you been? The truck stop t-shirt with the wolves walking through your chest. The one you begged for when you were 10. What do they know of you, having been through your ribs, bones that cage nothing, not your lungs, which have always breathed evenly, but that's not how any of this works. Next 2 stanzas continue in that vein. I quite like it. I'm a fan of wolves in the distance, not when they're up front and growling, although they don't really attack humans. We just attack them, unfortunately. The last poem of the first section by Land, poem Everything, ends, I am trying to hold everything at once. And this also brings one back to Walt Whitman, that his idea that he is everything, that he is all people, is something that he carries through a lot of his poetry, particularly the Song of Myself. And this kind of closed out the On Land section for me. Recalling Whitman was quite pleasant. Then we have By Sea, the second section. And these, it's not all about the sea, but a lot about water, about being on the boats, being in the ocean. Weighted, the first one in there, I quite liked that poem. I am weighing myself down with the stones. I try to name them as we turn them over. The pink of feldspar-rich granite, green veins in the unakite, the deep blood running through a banded jasper. I want to ground myself in this moment, already past tense, already memory. Very nice poem. The Portrait of an Addict as the Elements. I quite liked this. There are a number of lines that really caught my interest, piqued my interest. You cave into the earth. You wish you could have caved into your mother's arms, but she was not that kind of mother. She was as easy to hold on to as air. There are other parts of this poem that are similar, but those lines really struck out to me. Difficulties we go through in our lives, our relationships, our family. Yeah, she was as easy to hold on to as air. What a wonderful description. When we were children, we were mermaids. Very good poem. Florida Girl. This was a powerful poem as well. I liked this. Talks about a girl from Florida playing around. She's got a pet tortoise. Florida girl has sand in her food because she is always at the beach. This also touches on some of the difficulties that a young child can have in school. Idea of someone who never has the right words for things. And the landscape comes in a little bit. Nice poem. So this was interesting. Every poem is about my father. And from this point on in the sea, there are poems which appear to be discussing her father. Kind of an interesting thought. Every poem is about her father, but here at the last 3 lines, she's talking about herself, I assume. I don't yet know how to live with people. I think I have it down. And then I open my mouth. Yeah, the awkwardness of childhood. She talks here about some of the secrets of nature when she would collect insects and salamanders and snakes. The Fire Eater. This is a longer poem that I quite enjoyed. Exterminator. Yeah. This was a good poem. The insects that take over our homes. Now in New England, we don't have as much of a problem with that as they do in places like Florida or Texas, Gulf Coast. For her, this is Florida. And again, those pesky insects. It's a long one. Homecoming. This is about a father, maybe not her father, coming home after being at sea for a while. A poem about Hurricane Gloria. My father's hands. Again, those things that strike us even years later about our parents. Close. Very much like this one. This is about a young girl swimming in the ocean. She sees a tortoise, she sees a grouper, then she sees a jellyfish and has to come to the surface. There is no way of knowing how these memories may weigh me down more than any other. Yeah, strength of memories, which ones stick with us our whole lives. Broken Water, I liked that one. Wild Horses on Cumberland Island. This is one of my favorite poems in the collection. I didn't pick out a line or two to read because I liked the whole thing. It's about a person out by Cumberland Island and runs across 3 wild horses. 4 wild horses. A stallion, 2 mares, and a yearling. And the yearling, curious, figuring it's safe, goes up. She can step a little closer. It comes a little closer. Our connection to wild things on the planet really struck me. I have a photograph, framed photograph up in my living room of horses that I believe were on Cumberland Island, if I remember correctly. Emergency procedures. Practicing for what you do out to sea if an emergency comes up. A father and his daughter. That is something that you ingrain into the people that you travel with. I'm sorry. That is something you want to ingrain with children as they're doing things like learning how to use boats at sea, what to do in emergencies. And we do fire drills in our schools, right? We do a lot of drilling on much more dangerous things than that now. Always try and be prepared. As we get a little farther into the collection, we have some visions about her and her family as an adult. Home, for example. You hear about her and her husband. And if you listen carefully, you can hear my dogs barking upstairs. And this weekend, in an acknowledgement to my wife, we're getting a little kitten because my wife would like a cat. So I do recommend this collection of poetry. I don't know where you can pick up a hard copy. I'll maybe look it up and see if there's a link down below. If there is, then please use it. If there isn't, and when I got this is before publication of it, pre-publication review, and I'm sorry, this is a pre-publication review, so I don't know the publication date. I'll see if I can dig that up and put some information below. Thank you very much for joining us here again at Reading Past Midnight. We still have not reached 100 subscribers. When we do, I will be giving away either a copy of Hawthorne's Tales and Sketches to one person chosen from those who have left some sort of comment, which is very few right now. And just in case there's more interest. What? Okay. Just in case there's a lack of interest in Hawthorne, I'll have an option or two. Please. Thank you again for joining me here on Reading Past Midnight. Please remember to hit like and subscribe to help support the channel and help us grow.